Everywhere you look, the headlines are getting louder. Breaking news, urgent updates, bold alerts. Some say martial law is about to begin. Others talk about imminent blackouts or World War III being just around the corner. You see these stories not only on news sites but across YouTube, Telegram, X, and almost every social feed. It is easy to get caught up in the drama, but how do you really tell what is real and what is just hype? Out of respect for the work of others, I will never call out any channels or pages by name. Today, I want to show you the patterns and the logic behind the most viral panic stories so you can decide for yourself what truly matters and what is just noise. Spend even 5 minutes online, and you will come across urgent warnings and dramatic claims of crisis. Sometimes even channels and pages that will end up amplifying stories that sound much bigger than they really are. In the sea of headlines, how do you spot the difference between real signals and just another round of fear? To answer that, we need to look closely at why these stories catch on and what the facts really say behind the most viral narratives. Because every week it feels like the world is 5 minutes from the next disaster, but reality almost never matches the headlines. So today, let's break it all down. Few claims spark more fear or speculation online than the idea that NATO is secretly preparing for all-out war with Russia. Lately, this rumor has been everywhere, especially whenever there is any sign of military movement in Eastern Europe or news of a large joint exercise. Almost every week, new satellite images or video clips of troop convoys appear on social media, presented as ironclad proof that a major escalation is just around the corner. These stories always seem to peak right before major summits, like the recent NATO leaders meeting in Brussels, or during exercises like Steadfast Defender, which saw more than 90,000 troops training together across the continent. Headlines spread fast, and many channels claim that these are rehearsals for a real conflict about to break out. But what does the real evidence show? If you actually look at what the top military officials and strategic analysts are saying, people like NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, or the U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown, you hear a message that is a world away from the viral panic. Official statements emphasize that these exercises are planned years ahead, published publicly, and even open to international observers, specifically to avoid misunderstandings. In fact, according to both Reuters and the BBC, transparency is now a core principle for NATO, precisely to reduce the risk of miscalculation. These drills are not about preparing for an immediate war. They are about demonstrating collective defense and testing logistics over large distances. Key lessons learned after Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed the security landscape in Europe. The facts back this up. For instance, Steadfast Defender spanned 6 months, involved more than 30 nations, and was designed to stress test how quickly forces could move across the continent. Nothing about it was secret. NATO even invited journalists to document the process, and most of the equipment movements were shared in real time through official channels. Still, every time a convoy passes through Poland or a battalion trains in the Baltics, rumors explode online that mobilization is underway, or that NATO is crossing Russia's red line. What gets lost in the noise is context. Large-scale exercises have always been part of NATO's calendar, even during quieter times. What has changed is not so much the frequency of drills, but the volume of speculation and the way every routine event is amplified into a sign of coming war. The difference between readiness and real escalation matters, and it can be measured. Actual mobilization would look very different. It would involve things like sudden mass recalls of reservists, rerouting of civilian logistics for military use, and direct changes in force posture, none of which are happening right now. If you track open source intelligence, from independent analysts to groups like the Institute for the Study of War, the same message comes through. No unexplained spikes in troop movements, no hidden transfers of strategic assets, no signs that NATO is abandoning diplomatic channels. In fact, despite the high tension, back-channel communication between NATO and Russia continues. and both sides know the stakes of a miscalculation. There is another point worth mentioning. Much of the panic stems from a misunderstanding of how military alliances actually operate. Exercises like Steadfast Defender are about coordination, logistics, and building interoperability between armies that use different languages, equipment, and doctrine. The whole idea is to prepare for any scenario, not to provoke one. And while readiness is at its highest since the Cold War, as confirmed by Defense One and Foreign Affairs, the fundamental goal remains deterrence, not preemption. That is why official sources are so transparent, publishing maps, dates, and even inviting Russian observers under international agreements. Yet, despite all this, the cycle continues. Every new movement is filmed, shared, and reinterpreted as a sign that war is days away. This is not just a social media phenomenon, it is a reflection of how fear can spread faster than facts. Real escalation, when it happens, will not be announced by viral headlines or blurry photos of convoys on a highway. It will show up in coordinated diplomatic statements, emergency government sessions, mass mobilizations, and shifts in defense spending that cannot be hidden from public view. So the next time you see those claims about NATO's imminent war plans, take a moment to look for what has actually changed on the ground. Ask yourself, are we seeing signals of real conflict, or just another turn in the cycle of rumor and hype? That is the difference between being informed and just being alarmed. Martial law rumors are among the fastest spreading panic stories on the internet today. Videos and posts appear every week, claiming that governments are about to impose emergency rule in response to unrest, blackouts, or nuclear risk. Most of these stories are fueled by vague statements or routine emergency planning documents that get taken out of context. Take, for example, recent rumors in Romania and Poland, which spread quickly on Telegram and prepping channels. Some claim that the presence of soldiers during civil defense exercises was proof of martial law. However, if you check official government releases, you find that these were routine annual drills required by law and publicized in advance. The same thing happened in the United States last winter, when speculation about emergency powers started circulating after FEMA issued a standard preparedness update for hurricane season. The reality is, true martial law is extremely rare and requires an actual collapse of civil authority, which is not happening in any Western country right now. BBC News and The Guardian both reported on these stories, pointing out that while governments do make plans for emergencies, the leap from planning to actual martial law is enormous. So, the next time you see a headline or video announcing martial law imminent, check for any official declaration, legal framework, or real emergency before letting fear take hold. Almost every week, rumors of an incoming grid collapse or continent-wide blackout go viral, usually sparked by isolated incidents or official warnings about cyber threats. Channels jump on local outages or hacking reports to suggest that a massive blackout is only hours away. This cycle repeated just last month, when a temporary power loss in parts of eastern Germany led to dozens of viral videos predicting an imminent European grid failure. In reality, the incident was caused by a single equipment malfunction and was resolved within a few hours, as confirmed by the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity. Reuters and AP News reported on the incident, clarifying that the European power grid is highly resilient, with multiple backup systems and regular stress tests. Even when cyber attacks are reported, such as the one on a regional utility company in France, experts from the International Energy Agency emphasize that critical infrastructure is designed to withstand multiple failures and that coordinated attacks leading to continent-wide blackouts remain extremely unlikely. Still, these stories keep returning, especially when geopolitical tensions are high. The real risk is not in the headlines, but in the technical details, and when you listen to what actual grid operators and engineers say, you get a very different story from what is trending online. So ask yourself, how many times have you seen blackout predictions that never materialized? Few stories generate as much speculation as the claim that China will invade Taiwan in the next 72 hours. Videos and posts use footage of Chinese military drills, naval exercises, or tough talk from officials to suggest that a full-scale war is already planned. Just last week, several channels picked up on the annual Chinese live-fire exercises in the Taiwan Strait, framing them as proof that an invasion was imminent. But when you look at the actual analysis from sources like Nikkei Asia, The Guardian, and the Financial Times, the picture is much more nuanced. Yes, China has increased its military presence around Taiwan and its rhetoric has grown sharper, but every major analyst, including the RAND Corporation and the Center for Strategic and International Studies, points out that there is no evidence of immediate plans for invasion. The cost for China would be enormous, and both U.S. and Taiwanese intelligence agencies continue to report that while the risk is real, there are no signs of the final steps that would indicate an imminent conflict, such as mass mobilization or evacuation of civilians. So every time you see headlines saying China invades tomorrow, remember that the real signals would not just be in exercises, but in actual deployment orders and logistic movements on a massive scale. Another recurring theme is the rumor that mandatory military conscription is about to be enacted in the United States or across Europe. As soon as tensions rise anywhere, channels and social media feeds fill with claims that the draft is just days away, often citing recruitment campaigns or government statements completely out of context. Earlier this year, for example, videos went viral alleging that the U.S. Congress was secretly preparing new draft legislation. What actually happened was a debate on improving voluntary military service, as covered by the Associated Press and Defense One. Similarly, several European countries reviewed their reserve policies, but none announced plans for a general draft. Germany, for instance, conducted a public discussion on expanding its military readiness, but government leaders explicitly stated that there were no plans for compulsory service at this time. BBC News reported on these developments, highlighting that while recruitment and preparedness are always under review, mandatory conscription requires an entirely different legal process and would not happen without a major public political debate. So, while draft rumors make for dramatic headlines, the facts are very different from the panic. When food prices rise or supplies are disrupted anywhere, panic headlines about global famine and supply chain collapse spread almost instantly. Social media amplifies every report, and some channels turn isolated incidents into evidence of worldwide disaster. For example, last month, a spike in rice prices in Southeast Asia and drought warnings in Southern Europe triggered dozens of viral posts predicting famine across the Northern Hemisphere. However, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and the World Food Program, both widely cited by Reuters and Bloomberg, continue to report that while food insecurity is a serious and growing problem in specific regions, there is no evidence of a looming global famine. Supply chain experts at the World Economic Forum point out that disruptions are real but are being managed with increased diversification and new trade routes. Yes, markets remain volatile and there are local shortages, but the idea of a coordinated global food collapse is not supported by current data. So, before letting those headlines drive anxiety, it is worth checking the real numbers and the context. It is not just about clicks or views. Panic and hype generate engagement, build communities, and can even be used by outside actors to influence public opinion or destabilize societies. When every story is urgent, people are more likely to react emotionally, share quickly, and focus on worst-case scenarios. Researchers at the Atlantic Council and Oxford Internet Institute have shown how panic-driven stories spread faster and wider than fact-based reporting, especially when they appeal to fear, identity, or a sense of urgency. The constant stream of dramatic headlines creates a background noise that makes it harder to spot what is really changing. This benefits those who want to keep you watching, scrolling, or worried, whether for profit, influence, or simply attention. The most effective antidote is to slow down, check sources, and look for patterns, not just headlines. The entire mission of Safety Zone is to go beyond the surface and find the signals that actually matter. So what should you look for? Real escalation is rarely about a single event. Instead, watch for patterns across multiple areas. Sudden mass mobilizations, unexpected diplomatic evacuations, or a series of official statements coordinated across different governments. These are signs that something fundamental may be shifting. Trusted sources like Reuters, BBC, Defense One, and Nikkei Asia consistently emphasize the importance of cross-checking reports, following official data, and avoiding the temptation to let isolated stories color your entire view of the world. It is not always easy, but if you develop the habit of questioning the loudest headlines, you will always be a step ahead of the panic. Let's pause for a moment and really think about this. When every week seems to bring a new crisis, how do you keep your focus and not lose your sense of perspective? After years of tracking these stories, one thing stands out above all: the loudest voices are almost never the most accurate. The cycle is always the same. First comes the headline, a warning of war, a sudden blackout, a law about to change everything. Next, dozens of channels and social pages amplify the story, each trying to outdo the other with stronger language, bigger numbers, and more dramatic predictions. By the time the facts actually arrive, most people have already moved on, left with nothing but anxiety and confusion. This is not just a media problem, it is a psychological one. Human brains are wired to react to threats, to focus on the immediate, and to give more weight to anything that feels urgent or dangerous. That is why the constant flood of breaking news can be so exhausting, even when much of it is just recycled fear. Over time, you start to notice a pattern. The same themes come back, just with different names and new packaging. The real skill is learning to recognize when you are seeing genuine change versus when you are just seeing another turn of the hype cycle. For me, that means slowing down and asking a few simple questions every time a new panic story appears. Has anything fundamental really changed, or are we just reacting to noise? Are there multiple credible sources confirming the story, or is it just the same claim bouncing around the echo chamber? Is there real-world evidence, like policy shifts, troop movements, or official statements, or just speculation and anonymous tips? I have found that the best way to stay grounded is to compare information, to cross-check stories, and to keep a long-term perspective. The world is full of risk, but real shifts almost always show up in patterns, not just in single headlines. This is where the community can make a real difference. By sharing insights, challenging assumptions, and helping each other read between the lines, we can all get better at telling the difference between real warning signs and the endless noise of the internet. So I want to hear from you. What is the wildest or most stressful rumor you have seen this month? When did you realize it was just another round of panic? Let's talk in the comments and help each other break the cycle, because in a world that is always on high alert, clarity is more valuable than ever. If you are watching this, you are not just chasing the next big headline. You are here for real analysis, context, and a smarter way to read the world. Subscribe to stay ahead of the drama. Share your experiences in the comments. Let's build a community that is ready for anything without falling for panic. Stay sharp, Safety Zone.